Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this board meeting of Wednesday, September 21st. I am going to ask our student board member, Isabel Lau, who is a student at CAMS, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you so much. We will hear more from Isabel shortly. We welcome those who are here for purposes of addressing the board at the proper order and the time of their request. If you wish to speak during the board meeting, please fill out a form indicating your name and the agenda item you wish to address. You may also make a request to give testimony on an item not listed for discussion today. However, full discussion on any items not listed on the agenda will have to be delayed until such a time as the item can be publicly posted in advance as a regular agenda item. If you wish to ask questions, please address them to the chair and not to individual members of the board or staff. The board has been meeting in closed session regarding matters listed on today's closed session agenda and wishes to report that no reportable actions were taken. Item 8, call for agenda items for separate action, adoption of the agenda as posted.
Move approval. Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Passes 5-0 with no abstentions. Introduction of our student board member. Welcome, Isabel Lau from CAMS.
Thank you.
You've got the floor to tell us any and everything you'd love to tell us about yourself and CAMS.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Isabel Lau. I am the current Associated Student Body President representing CAMS. So before we began this school year, we held our annual freshman orientation, which is led by Link Crew. And we do this to create connections with upperclassmen and integrate the freshmen into our school culture. Something new we implemented this time was the study skill sessions about a week before school started. So not only were the freshmen prepared socially for high school, they were also being prepared for the academic rigor of CAMS. Link Crew also held our first Link Crew event after the school year started, which we had game night and popsicles. We had great turnout, and the freshmen got to bond with their Link Crew leaders as well as their own class. Our College and Career Center counselors held college application workshops over the summer to prepare seniors before the applications even opened. They've been really helpful this year, constantly posting scholarship and internship opportunities for students. They also individually met with every single senior for graduation check and are offering 2 rounds of essay revisions before college application submissions. So I would like to shout out Ms. Shub and Mrs. Johnson-Agolto. We've had consistent college workshops with representatives coming in from Claremont McKenna, Notre Dame, Pepperdine, and UC Riverside so far. There is a college fair being held on our own campus next Friday with schools such as Carnegie Mellon, UC San Diego, and Cal Poly Pomona coming, just to name a few. CAMS has had a great start to the school year with a back-to-school lunch rally. We had our Korean dance club perform 2 pieces, and we reintroduced, our teachers and staff along with our 2 new teachers, Miss Lee, who is a freshman English teacher, and Senora Fuentes, who teaches AP Seminar as well as Spanish. The college semester has also started, so many of our juniors and seniors, including myself, have been taking classes both at Cal State Dominguez Hills as well as Long Beach City College. We also held our back to school night on September 1st, where we had fantastic parent participation, especially from freshmen as always. We also had a very successful club rush on September 8th with 74 clubs participating in the event. This year we had so many clubs that we did have to split tables and have 2 clubs share one. The total number of clubs we have at CAMS at the moment is 93. Yeah. Our first robotics competition, FRC team, has also had a lot more interest than usual, which is already the most popular club on campus. So we had around 40 new people, so that was pretty great. For athletics updates, Despite CAM's reputation, CAM's girls volleyball is doing extremely well for themselves. Currently, they are undefeated so far at 6-0 in the Coastal League. They actually currently have a game at Lindsay Middle School as we speak, so good luck to them. Girls tennis has also won their league opener against Jordan on the 13th. Cross country has also started and had their first meet yesterday at Cheviot Hills Park. And girls soccer will begin practice on October 4th. Our MECHA, Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aslan Club at CAMS, held a rally for Hispanic Heritage Month recently with music, games, and prizes. We had a great turnout, and it was a lovely celebration of Hispanic heritage. ASB is currently preparing for Fall Games coming up in about 2 weeks. Fall Games is a week-long event where classes compete in sports like basketball and volleyball for a Spirit Points in preparation for our Fall Spirit Week and Spirit Rally. Lastly, CAMS would like to extend an invite to you all for our annual Taste of CAMS on October 21st, arguably our biggest event on campus. Taste of CAMS will have student performances, school tours, clubs selling food and goods, and showcases of our students' work and our robotics teams. PTSO, our parent-teacher-student organization, is also selling CAMS gear if you would all like to purchase. And we hope to see you all there. Overall, I'm happy to say that CAMS is doing very well for themselves and has had a great start to the school year. Thank you all for listening, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your very thorough update on what's happening at CAMS. We know you've had a head start on some of the rest of our schools. You started a little earlier. So can you tell us a little bit about you? You're a senior.
Yes.
And the position that you hold, I'm sorry, I missed it. Plans next year, we know it's that time of year where you're submitting applications and all of that. Would love to hear your hopes and dreams, a stretch school, where you want to land next year.
I would say UCs, and there's a few privates, I guess, in more big cities. That's just my preference for location. I don't want to name drop because I feel like it might jinx it.
Totally understand.
For major-wise, I am thinking about data science, and I'd like to pick up either a double major or minor in business or theater.
Thank you so much. I know Dr. Benitez always has a suggestion right there on his. He didn't turn it your direction yet, but in case you were looking for something.
You don't have to name drop, but I can name drop all day. Right, here's one of your UCs that I think you're nodding yes. So yeah. I want to give you props for pulling off Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aslan on Latinx Heritage
I didn't want to
Month.
butcher it.
Great job.
Thank you.
Colleagues, any questions for Isabel? Comments? Did you bring any folks with us to? Oh, Mr. Miller, did you have something? No. Okay. Did you bring any folks with you who are supporting you out there in the audience that you'd like to introduce?
I came here by myself today.
All right. Well, we appreciate you being here. Dr. Benitez, I see you.
You're not by yourself. We're all here.
We got you. Yeah. You're more than welcome to stay for the business meeting, but we understand that times are busy, and if you've got homework or things you need to do or places you need to be, that we take no offense if you decide to go on your way tonight, but you're always welcome to stay, and we're really grateful for you coming to voice the great things happening at CAMS. And please give everyone our best back at the school.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you. So we have recognitions and acknowledgments. Actually, Isabel, you might want to stay. The video. And then you might have something else to say. We don't know. But we wanted to give you the opportunity. So we're going to play we have two tonight, but we're going to play a video first.
Hey, I'm Troy. I'm an 11th grader from CAMS High School. This is my first LBUSD school that I've attended to, and I really like CAMS because it's a small class size, but I feel like I'm closer to all my friends and classmates, and I know everyone by name here, so it's really nice compared to like my old school, which was like 4,000 kids. And I feel like we have a really great sense of like family. My grandmother passed away 6 years ago from Alzheimer's, and ever since then I realized that Alzheimer's disease had no cure, and so I found the Alzheimer's Association. I've just been fundraising and volunteering, many events and like activities I've done. I was so ecstatic to finally get the congressional award. It requires 400 service hours, and it just like felt like all the hard work I put into it was like finally like I got a reward for it, and it felt really nice. So I hope that I could like inspire my friends to also try to find some cause they want to support and try to bring more good to the community.
Super cool. Great things happening at CAMS. Thanks to Mr. Itzen for finding that student. I think it was a social media post that he posted about his work, and we found him that way. So if you run into him on campus, tell him we're super proud and excited for the work he's doing. Thank you. All right, we have one more, and this is, so I wanted to do this as soon as I heard about it, but we had to wait until the ceremony, and we had to wait till we had the award. So I'm going to ask Dr. Elio Mendoza to come to the podium to talk about the CalSPRA Award of Excellence for Community Engagement Campaign that the Educational Partnership High School has earned. Welcome, Dr. Mendoza.
Thank you very much. It's exciting. Board President Megan Kerr, Board of Education Superintendent Dr. Baker, Executive Cabinet. And I was watching the board workshop yesterday, and Mr. Miller, you gave recognition to Letitia, and I'd like to welcome you to, or thank you to Letitia. I don't know even where to begin. I wrote some words that spoke with Mr. Grayson earlier, but this is a proud evening for us. Joe Ward, Dr. Joe Ward is here, and I'd like to take all the credit. I'm going off script a little bit, but I'll get back on script in a second. He was, 5 years ago, when I was asked to go to EPHS, he came along, he was there. He came and joined the EPHS team. And he was really interested in how are we going to communicate? What can we do? We had a planner, but it was one of those generic models, and it really didn't give relevant information to what EPHS is all about. So you've all received our planner in September of last year. This is last year's planner that you have with you. But what you have with you is a holistic packet that we sent to all of you. We sent to all of our partners because we are a partnership, educational partnership high school. We sent them to principals, head counselors, counselors. We want everyone to know about EPHS and the things that we're doing there. So now I'm going to get back on script. Our purpose at EPHS is to individually support students for an enhanced personalized education. We are proud of the fact that the materials we use for this purpose is our achievement planner, and that's in there, of course, given to each student during their first day of student orientation into our program. Our achievement planner effectively communicates the myriad of opportunities, expectations, and informations that stakeholders desire, and now includes our graduation packet, and I think Dr. Baker highlighted that at one of our board meetings. I think it was last year or 2 years ago. Time really flies. So that students can begin with the end in mind. With a personalized education and professional communication among all stakeholders, we believe that our success in past core surveys results from the first-class form of communication. When you have time to peruse this packet, you will find that our communication in student expectation and parent obligation is clear, friendly, and in partnership with our families. EPHS continues to live up to its mission, vision, and values, which you'll also see card stock in there of our mission, vision, values, and all the other good stuff that is important for our students in our community. We have also developed an EPHS brochure to make clear to the unclear of what EPHS has to offer. Finally, I already said thanks to Joe Wharton. That was my next part of the script. But honestly, he spent countless hours working with our media. I don't think they're called media anymore. It's the graphic design department. I mean, really, really, truly spent tons of hours. And also, this was very costly. So I want to thank you, Board of Education, for the funds that we had and that we were able to use to get the message out. CalSPRA is California Public Schools Association. Wait, California, help me out there.
California School PR Association.
Yes. And I think there are 3 words under there are communities, connect, communities, and inspire, something like that, right?
Yes.
I think it is, yes. Anywho, that's it for this evening, and I'm really happy for our community. That will be on display tomorrow morning in our office, and it will stay there. And we're very proud to be up here representing independent studies. So thank you very much. Have a good
So,
evening.
hang on. So I'm going to have you pass that to me. So, it's an incredible packet. And this has all of it. So this has the graduation stuff in it as well, which we added, but it has the planner. I'm going to get emotional. I didn't choose to do that very often. I'm a proud mom of an EPHS grad.
We all know that at EPHS.
Yes, I share that with the EPHS community all the time. And he didn't have the opportunity to be supported and encouraged and lifted up with something so beautiful and inviting and welcoming him to the world of EPHS. So thank you for doing this for our kids, because anyway, you know how I feel about EPHS. So this is a testament to your hard work, the incredible team that you have at EPHS, and the incredible commitment of students and families that put in the work every day. So congrats on a well-deserved award in service to our amazing EPHS community. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're on to item 11, public testimony on items listed on the agenda. Letitia, I do not see any, so we don't have any. So we'll move on to item 12, public testimony on items not listed on the agenda. Welcome, everybody. Our first speaker will be Jerlene Tatum.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jerlene Tatum, LBUSD parent. I am here to speak on a non-agendized item, the Black Student Achievement Program or Initiative. Last year, LBUSD made a statement. It dedicated funding for the achievement and success of Black students. This statement included a commitment of $750,000 in the 2021-2022 budget. The Black Student Achievement Initiative was launched, an advisory group was formed, and many meetings took place. I got an opportunity to serve on that committee and even participate in the very first Black Symposium. Unfortunately, somewhere in there was a breakdown of transparency in communication. Over the 9 months, I, along with others, asked for, what is the budget? How is the money going to be spent? I know part of the meetings was for us to kind of decide what that was going to be, but still, $750,000 over a period of time, where was it going? After repeatedly requesting and asking different levels of staff, I did not get an answer. So I used the tool at hand, and I requested a Public Records Act, or submitted a Public Records Act. And in that, there was many findings, but one of the findings was that out of the $750,000, $655,000 of it remained as of June. I put the request in June. I know there was a program that was launched over the summer, so I'm hoping that some of the funding went to support the Sankofa program. But I'm here today, one, because of the breakdown in communication. I shouldn't have to be here right now, especially when I've not sure where the barriers got put up. Maybe it's because I put in the Public Records Act. But again, community has to use the tools that are available to them when they have it available to them. And I just want to ask, where is the equity and excellence in ensuring that Black students matter when you have not spent the money and we don't know where the money is going and there's a sudden breakdown in transparency and communication? And the fact that there's the lack of communication when the BSAI is under the Communication and Community Engagement Department in itself, that I find problematic, because I'm like, Black student achievement under the Communication and Community Engagement Department? Aren't we talking about success? Aren't we talking about closing a gap? So anyway, I just wanted to make sure that that was on record and hope that communication can be restored and transparency. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kirsten Chun.
Good afternoon y buenas tardes, Superintendent Baker, President Kerr, Vice President Craighead, and esteemed members of the LBUSD Board of Education. Can all of you hear me okay? Great. My name is Kirsten Chun. I live in District 5. I supported you, President. Oh, thank you. Do you want to sit, love? Want to sit? Okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Rodriguez. And I supported you, President Kerr, for the Long Beach City Council and intend to do so again in November. When voters approved Measure E in 2016, my daughter and I were in our second trimester of pregnancy. When her school, Patrick Henry, finally receives the HVAC updates, she'll be in middle school. She'll be done with Henry, hopefully at Keller. In her second week of school, children were missing up to 3 days of school because of the extreme heat and the lack of access to HVAC, which I understand was pushed back from 2024 to 2027. I've been asking to understand the criterion by which that decision is made. I have not yet received that information. We're not asking to be moved up to bump other schools. Obviously, educational equity and health and safety concerns are of importance to all LBUSD children. However, we just want to know more about the timeline for that, how that's decided. For example, why are locker room upgrades considered more important than preventing 20-minute nosebleeds? Oh, thank you. Or preventing absenteeism in school. The district's own website cites a 2018 Harvard study that says for every 1 degree in temperature increase, there is a 1% decrease in educational outcomes. That concerns me. My partner and I, where's your stuff? My partner and I worked really hard to get her into Patrick Henry. We bought a house. I'm just gonna turn sideways so I can monitor. We bought a house in the district when she was 7 months old, or near the district. We did school of choice and we were unable to get close enough. We're in love with the teacher, in love with the school. So thrilled with the parent community. But we don't think that learning a new language or being exposed to children who are different from her means that the cost should be educational inequities and 20-minute nosebleeds, risk of heat stroke, dehydration, everything mentioned by the AAP and the CDC. And we don't think children at the other 18, 19 schools that won't get HVAC until 5, 12, 13 years later should do the same, which means that existing educational inequities would only be exacerbated by the lack of access to HVAC. I was honored to be at your workshop yesterday. Really appreciate the opportunity to learn more from the, that's really cool. Oh, thank you. I'll say that at the end. She wrote thank you. She wants me to thank you. From the facilities folks. But I just felt like there was such a disconnect in this, if you don't mind me saying so, beautiful, cool, comfortable building where we can all wear suits, whereas a couple hours ago, I was at her classroom on a cooler day, 85 degrees. I had to take my jacket off just to go pick her up for 5 minutes. But in sum, I will say thank you, as Sienna said. Please remember these are real people, real children. Every day we entrust them to your care. Please take care of them. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And she's always welcome with her stuffy and writing thank you notes whenever. Our next speaker is Tim Gilmore.
Okay, hello, my name is Tim Gilmore, and 2012 I started a nonprofit Poly Alumni Association's president. Tonight I wanted to talk to you about Long Beach Unified School District standards along with Long Beach Poly High School standards. Standards are something that we really should be, as a community, not talking about just for an election or when we have good press, but in general with ourselves, and we should be able to have standards against what we've done last year and not comparing them to other districts or other people to make ourselves look better. I was kind of disappointed with Poly Site Council in May of last year when I wasn't allowed to speak for whatever reason, and it was somewhat frustrating, as well as Poly Site Council not starting like they usually do, which is they start in September. Now we're starting in October. But when I was really surprised is when I had one of my Poly alums, Ru Ayala, who called me and told me that the junior OTC program has no instructors teaching it currently. And I said, well, what was going on? And so I did some research, and I called Long Beach Unified, and I talked to Jamie Sorensen, and I talked to a few other people to find out that Christopher Quinn, the instructor, actually left last year in the middle of the year. And I'm somewhat disappointed at that. Now I'm working at that, trying to work with the Veterans Administration, Mr. Stanley Rhodes, to see if we can get somebody in there. But I was kind of disappointed and a little bit embarrassed to see that something like this occurred. It looks like from now on we're probably going to look at a teacher shortage. It's very difficult to deal with. But Poly has a great tradition, and it's kind of disappointing that that tradition is kind of falling off. But we really need to deal with that and do that as well. And a couple of other things that I'd like to see changed is I'm trying to get my public request. I have 3 of them, and I've been working with Mr. Suarez on it to try to get 2 of them, which are somewhat overdue. The other issue I'd like to address is the workshop also this morning, or yesterday morning that we had. I'd like to see if we could have that more with the public being involved in seeing all that. A couple of other issues too. I know the bond thing is coming up, and I don't know who's working on it, or if Taub or anybody else, but we need to pass that $1.7 billion bond, desperately. So we need to find out who's going to be campaigning for it, and I definitely want to help out and see if we can get that bond passed. Lastly, I want to thank Miss Linda Rasmussen, who I've known for some time now, and her 43 years of service, and it's great that she's helped me out as a friend. And the last thing is Gerald Casey, who is donating money towards a field house at Poly High School, LPA. I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gilmore. Our next speaker is Stephanie Rozo.
Hear me through this mask, so. My name is Stephanie Razzo, and I'm a parent of 2 students at Patrick Henry Elementary, and I'm speaking about the heat problems as well today, like Kirsten. And I'm going to make this pretty short. There's just certain things I want to touch on. I watched the meeting yesterday. There's the current environment at Long Beach Unified School District with the schools without HVAC are just unsafe. It's just bad for the students and the teachers, and it's just not a good situation. Something needs to be done. I know the HVAC process is long, but we need to make that a priority to get it started because it is so long for all of the schools. This is just unacceptable. And we have to find a way to prioritize that now, because it does take a really long time to get it going. And lastly, I'd like to see implementation of the alternative methods for heat mitigation. I'd like to see those happening as soon as possible to help the students, like the misters, the shade structures, and access to cold water. At our school in particular, there were parents coming up with lots of coolers of ice cold water for everybody, but it just wasn't enough. It was just a really bad situation, and I'd really like to make sure that doesn't happen again. So I think there are things we can do to make that a better situation now. And I think starting this process of getting the HVAC prioritized into the schools is utmost importance, and we need to see that started now. And that's it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Stephanie. Our next speaker is Odalis Monge, and I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Just a second. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Odalis Monge. These are my 3 children here. This is Ethan, Ava, and Gianna. So I'm the proud parent of 3. One's a former LBUSD, but 3 ULBC students. She's now moved on to McAuliffe Middle School in LaSalle. My younger children, Ethan and Gianna, are in 3rd grade NTK at Patrick Henry. And the year my oldest was enrolled at Henry was the year that the bond measure was passed, 2016. And I remember being so hopeful and so excited that my kids would see the benefits of that bond measure. And now I've come to the realization that none of them will see that, despite a span of over 12 years of being at that school. I want to bring attention to a couple of things that came up in the workshop yesterday. While I'm relieved to hear that you're finally looking at bringing in window AC units, I cannot imagine that this is the first time that that idea has come up. Secondly, Dr. Benitez, I think you kind of mentioned yesterday, or questioned, whether it was a lack of preparation on the part of the district. And while the answer was a little bit different, I feel that as a parent looking in, it absolutely looks like that. This is something that is coming every year. We go through this every year, and yet nothing changes. Most of you have served on this board for several years and claim that you have the kids and teachers' safety and best interest at heart. But I have to tell you, as the saying goes, actions really do speak louder than words. Stephanie and Kirsten mentioned a couple of things. Every year, as parents, especially the new ones that come to the school, it's kind of disheartening, are just desperate to find solutions to help our kids and our teachers feel safe. I personally spent over $100 just this year on neck fans, cooling towels, fans for the classroom. My husband and I even put together a DIY bucket cooler for the classroom to try and help. And I'm sure you realize that not all families can financially do these things. If the school electrical can't support AC units, I know that's being looked at, I implore you to prioritize the electrical work, and let's get that done. Additionally, why this work wasn't done during the COVID closures or summer months is something I can't understand that, but we can't go back in time. We need solutions now. I would imagine that most parents would prioritize HVAC over things like the natatorium conversions, the locker room updates, and artificial turf installations. As one of the largest districts in the state, this should be a major source of embarrassment. This should be a top priority, and the focus on excellence and equity means nothing if all of our students and staff don't have a safe environment conducive to learning. I pulled my children out early one day and kept them home for another entire day due to the excessive heat and unsafe conditions in their classroom. Moving forward, any day over 95 degrees, I will not send them. My nephew's teacher suffered a heat stroke on campus at a different school in Long Beach. Friends of ours have had their kids throwing up and getting heat-related illness. My 4-year-old's classroom has gotten up to 100 degrees, and that's just unacceptable. Lastly, I challenge all of you in this room. Next week's forecast is going to be in the 90s again, and I really do challenge you to pick a school in the district that doesn't have air conditioning and spend a day, not just an hour, not just 30 minutes, spend an entire day with our teachers in the classroom to really experience how dire the situation is.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sarah Roselli.
I'm not used to speaking with a microphone, so here we go. Please excuse the school attire. I am a teacher and just came from work. So my name is Sarah Roselli, and I teach students with moderate to severe disabilities at Poly High School. I'm here tonight because for the first time in my life, I've spent much of the last month worried a student could die in my classroom. I have multiple students who have seizure disorders that are triggered by heat, and for the first 2 weeks of school this year, my students were in danger in my classroom with temperatures in the 90s without air conditioning. Multiple students in our program had seizures at school during the first 2 weeks, and students stayed home from school because parents were afraid for their safety. The heat trigger is documented in their IEPs, and the school district and school site are well aware of it. For those of you who are unfamiliar with seizures, they cause permanent brain damage and can even be fatal. Before tonight, I have been reaching out to everyone humanly possible to get air conditioning in my classroom. Yesterday, I heard back from Alex Reesing, LBUSD Business Services Administrator. He emailed me and he explained, quote, district staff are currently working all non-air conditioned sites to determine where there may be able to install AC units. Once we have that information, we will be developing a plan on how we can move forward. We will definitely keep our most fragile students in mind when developing the plan. Unfortunately, I cannot risk my students' lives because history shows special education students have not been prioritized. Earlier today, I was looking through the Measure E information on our district website, and on the front page is Wilson High School. I was shocked to see that with Measure E funds, by winter 2024, Wilson will get a new outdoor pool in their aquatic center, their gym renovated, including telescopic bleachers, and the item that hurt the most is their natatorium, not good at that word, will get a quote, new high-efficiency air conditioning system. This means that while some poly students are literally risking their lives to attend school in classrooms without air conditioning, Wilson's natatorium will have brand new air conditioning. Additionally, the only sites I know of with solely students with disabilities attending are Tucker and Buffum. Buffum is scheduled to get HVAC completed in the 28-29 school year. And ACT is scheduled to have it completed in the school year 2029 to 2030. Why are the two sites that need it the most two of the last sites to get air conditioning? Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. We appreciate all of you coming out to speak with us. As you know, on non-agendized items, we cannot have a discussion. I will say that there was a presentation yesterday at the workshop by the facilities branch if folks want to hear a little more detail about what the facilities team is doing around studying for heat mitigation, that is available online, I believe. So we will move on to item 13, consent calendar A. Again, this is in our new model where we will approve a set of business items instead of taking them individually as a whole. We are, board members, just a reminder, you're available to shout out, to congratulate, or to give kudos or ask for a clarifying question on those items without having to pull it. So I will entertain a motion on consent calendar A.
Move approval.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Mr. Otto, did you have any comments or clarification you need on any items?
No, I tried to second it, but I was too late.
These two are quick. Ms. Craighead.
Yes. I would like to thank Rebecca Turrentine and Pamela Williams for signing on for another term, serving on the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. And also I want to highlight a donation for over $5,000 worth of girls' uniform shirts for Bethune. And that was a donation by Margaret Jewett and Jennifer Greenberg. And I just want to say, donating clean uniforms, I'm assuming new uniforms, for kids that are potentially homeless or have fallen on rough times, for those students to receive new uniforms to wear really helps with their self-confidence, and it's really a thoughtful gift. So thank you to those people.
Dr. Benitez, any questions, clarifications, or shout-outs?
A shout-out on our contract with the Guidance Center, providing additional mental health support. I know we referenced it yesterday, but for folks that haven't had the opportunity to see that, this is an additional layer to our health and safety measures at our school. So appreciate seeing that item on the agenda.
Mr. Miller.
He stole my shout-out, but ditto.
Yeah, it's a significant contract. I think it was $165,000 in additional resources. And I just want to call out that we have in here our partnership with Long Beach City College and Cal State Long Beach for school visits again for the College Promise. So nice to see those back on the agenda. Miss
I wasn't going to do it, but I'm going to do it. I can't believe we're getting charged for tours on campuses. Oh, okay, transportation, not for the actual tours themselves. Thank you for clarifying that, Dr. Baker. Yeah.
All right, any further conversation before we take a roll call vote? Okay, Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Dr. Benitez.
Aye.
Ms. Craighead.
Aye.
Mr. Otto.
Aye.
And I vote aye. That passes 5-0 with no abstentions. Consent calendar B. I recuse myself from participation in consent calendar B. I have a potential financial interest under Government Code 1091 and 87100. My husband works for a subcontractor who has done work for the awardee or payee, so I will hand it over to Vice President Craighead to do the vote.
Thank you. I need a motion.
So moved.
I waited for you, Mr. Otto, so that you could make the motion. I'll second that.
I thought I was just quicker this time.
Okay. Is there any discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That passes 4-0 with one abstention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Craighead. We're going to move on to staff report, our student outcomes focused portion of the evening. Tonight, we're going to hear about elementary literacy interventions, and I believe we will hear from Dr. Chris Brown, Dr. Christy Kale, and Mr. Brian Moskowitz, if I am not mistaken. Who wants to tee it off? I think it's Dr. C. Brown.
Yeah, I'll start as a part of our ongoing series looking at student outcomes and data. Although I did like literacy inventions, so I'm going to put that one on Mr. Moskowitz for all the literacy inventions we have. So on the data monitoring calendar, we talked about at this point looking at some of the interventions that we have. There's multiple interventions across the system that we're studying in the research department. We wanted to focus on two of them that have been implemented last year, and looking at the data from last year to look at the impact they had on students. And so we talked last year about this briefly. There's a couple of literacy.
Dr. Brown, could you pause for 1 second?
I absolutely
So we
can.
have the most updated slides in our hand.
No problem. You're going to want them.
I'm sure we do. You always present great things. I will take this brief interlude to remind folks that because it was mentioned in the public comment, that we do have a calendar of the data that we're going to be looking at. So coming up in October, we're going to be talking about iReady placements, SBAC growth, English language learner progress, and centering African American students, including the Black Student Achievement Initiative. That will be coming in October, so look for those.
And while you're paused, I'll just also add that calendar can be found under superintendent's goals. They're district goals, but it can be found under superintendent's goals with all of the corresponding presentations that are made under them. So the public has access to each of the presentations.
Great. Thank you. And we are now ready for you, Dr. Chris Brown.
No problem. So we will talk specifically about two literacy interventions that are in existence at the elementary schools across our system. And we have talked briefly about them in the past, but the first is the Leveled Literacy Instruction, or LLI program. The LLI program is currently at 31 elementary sites, and its counterpart in some of the other sites is the WonderWorks program, which is at 23 of our sites. And you can see on the map there the relative distribution of the sites that are using either leveled literacy instruction or WonderWorks for their literacy intervention in grades K through 5. And just as a reminder, these interventions are not supposed to replace quality core instruction in the classroom. These are supplements to the traditional instruction that are really designed to help students who need some support to get to the grade level achievement in literacy. So I'm going to actually turn it over to Mr. Moskowitz at this time to talk about how those programs were chosen and give you a little details on the programs.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. And just to be clear, so these all these programs are at both our elementary and our K-8 sites. So K-5 at all 54 of our elementary and K-8 sites, including Avalon. So some of the information that I'm going to share on this first slide is stuff that you've heard in the past as we were first talking about shifting from our former model of a literacy teacher with 20 students all day and shifting to thinking about a more holistic approach to how do we support students. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But before I get there, I just want to point out, which is something that I say often, anytime we talk about the work in our schools, it really touches on the work happening among departments all around this table. So while I'm going to share information today, it's really in collaboration with Dr. Kale and her team in OCIPD, and specifically some folks in OCIPD, Lisa Worsham, who's a program administrator who actually heads up the support and training for all of our teachers in this work, along with 3 TOSAs. One, Kate Picar, who is now an assistant principal at Dooley, but last year was serving in the role of TOSA in support of literacy. Liz Gladness as well. And then this year, Viviana Gutierrez has come on board. So those 4 folks really are carrying kind of the heavy weight of implementing this program and working with the 175 teachers across our system that are providing the direct services to students. So back in December 2020, you may recall that a team of OCIPD folks, people in the elementary office, principals, came together and were looking at that time we had about 10 or 12 programs that we thought research showed might be impactful and something we'd want to bring to Long Beach. We wanted to make sure that these were research-based and that they would be supportive of our students. We narrowed down to 2 programs based on the research and based on what we thought would be best suited to our students here in Long Beach, and that's LLI and WonderWorks. But we knew that we wanted to pilot a couple of different models so that we didn't put all our eggs in one basket. Let's run a couple of programs for a year or 2, let's look at the data, and then make some long-term decisions based on the impact of those programs. So at that time, you'll recall, this is right in the middle of our COVID years, before some of our ESSER dollars came our way. At that time, we only were targeting our Title I elementary schools, and we gave them the choice of these 2 programs. Many of our Title I schools, for a number of reasons, chose LLI primarily as the program they were going to implement. Later that spring, in April, we actually had the resources to expand to all of our schools, knowing that the instructional needs were across all of our schools. We've prioritized our Title I schools. There are many more literacy teachers at our Title I schools, but all of our schools are implementing one of the programs. And so at that point, as more schools were coming on board, we basically assigned them to WonderWorks as their program so that we could have 2 programs running that we could actually collect some data and monitor the effectiveness. So throughout that summer, Lisa Worsham and her team provided some training to all of the literacy teachers and the instruction intervention coordinators. And then throughout all of last year, that ongoing professional development has continued. And I point that out because last year was the first year of implementation. And these teachers, who are amazing teachers in our district, they were selected very intentionally for this, but they were also learning how to implement the system while they were learning the system themselves. So that's something I think is just important to remember. The other thing I want to move on to is just talk a little about some of our challenges last year. These may be obvious to some, but I think it's important to point this out before we look at the data, not as an excuse, because they're not excuses, but they're relevant challenges that our schools were experiencing that are part of the picture of implementing a program. So for example, we know that last year we had a lot of teacher and student absences, right? Kids were quarantined, teachers were in quarantine for various reasons. Many of our students who are in these programs were chronically absent. Partially could have been because of COVID, could have been because of quarantine, could have been because of their own family and life experiences. But when students are absent more than 20 days in a school year, you can imagine if they're in a program that is happening every day of the week, that disruptions in their service is going to maybe result in the impact of the program. The other thing is we had many of our teachers were out, again, for very valid reasons. Because we weren't always able to fill those vacancies with a substitute teacher, oftentimes it was our literacy teachers, these TOSAs, who went into the classroom to cover for that day. And the reality is, for a variety of reasons, many of our Title I schools experienced the greatest amount of unfilled sub-vacancies. And so at our Title I schools, LLI, more than others, we had literacy teachers in classrooms doing that core Tier 1 instruction. Not an excuse, just the reality of where we were last year. When we think about scheduling of interventions, this is a challenge that has been historic in elementary schools. So at the secondary level, you've heard of things like a math intervention course, where a student, for their course, one of their periods of the day will experience an intervention class, or it might be a 0 period or after school. Well, at the elementary level, the student has a full day of instruction that the teacher is preparing. And when an intervention teacher is going to pull that student or go into the room to provide that intervention, by definition, that means that they're missing something going on in the classroom. And so one of the things that we're always struggling with is what do we pull them from to provide an intervention that isn't so critical that they're going to miss in the classroom. And so our teachers last year, as they're juggling the students that have these needs that they're going to provide to, got better at making sure we weren't pulling them from their core language arts instruction. To pull them for an intervention in reading while they're missing reading instruction doesn't really work, but to pull them from a math lesson for a reading intervention isn't probably a great idea either. So that's something that we're constantly looking at. How do we find the right space to provide the intervention so that students aren't missing some of their core work? And then the last thing I'll say, again, thinking about that first year of implementation, our literacy teachers became much more adept as the year went on in identifying what specific reading needs does a child have and what types of program interventions will best meet that needs. So when we first implemented this, as an example, we said, okay, we're going to implement LLI as one of our programs. And our teachers, trying to be faithful, implemented the full program exactly as it might have said in that teacher's guide. But as we went along and as we learn more, we do better. We know that if a student is struggling with reading, there's a couple of different reasons why, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So our teachers were becoming much better by the end of the year at identifying the specific reading challenge and what type of program will best meet their needs. And again, I'll share a little bit more about that. But I just want to preface that, again, not as an excuse of any data, but I think it's some relevant challenges that our schools experienced. And even in spite of that, we saw some great highlights and some great successes that I'll hand back to Dr. Brown.
Yeah, thank you. So as we jump into the results from the past year, we always want to start with who got support, right? So how many students actually received this intervention? So when we're looking at this, we're looking at over 4,000 elementary students, and 1,200 of which were our EL students who were enrolled in these interventions. It was actually just over 2,400 of them in the LLI model, and then about 1,400 of them enrolled in WonderWorks. So we definitely want to start with who's in the intervention so we know that what we're talking about. We also noticed that our Hispanic and African American students were enrolled in the intervention higher than their enrollment rates in the schools. Like for our Hispanic students, the enrollment rates in the schools is 60%, but their enrollment rate in the interventions was 67%. And for African American students, their enrollment rate in the schools is 11%, but their enrollment rate in the interventions was 15%. So just an idea of who's in the group. And then as we talk about growth, one of the things that the team did in the research office is they didn't compare students in the intervention to students who weren't in the intervention. They compared students who were in the intervention to similar performing students who for some reason weren't in the intervention at the same site. So that way you get a truer look at the impact of the intervention as opposed to the impact of maybe students who didn't need the intervention not being in the intervention site. So students who didn't need the intervention were excluded from the comparison groups for the purpose of the next few slides.
Dr. Brown, real quick,
Sure.
What is similar to what does that mean? What do you?
So students, if the intervention was designed for students who were, let's say, 2 or more grade levels below, you wouldn't want to compare them to students who weren't in the intervention because they were on grade level. Like the very nature of students being on grade level versus students needing intervention means the comparisons would not be valid. So we compared them to other students at the school who were also 2 or more grade levels below, right? So it's a comparison group, so it makes it isolates or tries to isolate as much as we possibly can the impact of the intervention.
So it got a little complicated here, Dr. C. Brown.
Oh, slow.
Why wouldn't a student be in an intervention if they were 2 or more grade levels behind?
I'm going to let Mr. Moskowitz
It's a great question, isn't it? So I'm going to there's a couple of competing data points that we're looking at, right? So you'll recall last year was the first year we implemented iReady. And we actually gave the first administration of iReady in late October because we were kind of delayed in the implementation. And we also, as a system, didn't put a lot of eggs in one basket of iReady because we were still learning what does iReady data even tell us. It took us a year to really understand what growth means, the metrics and all that. In the meantime, our teachers were providing diagnostic assessments to determine early on what were some of the reading needs of students. So they administered these assessments to many students across the school to find the students needing the intervention. And they started providing the intervention for most of the year based on some of those early diagnostics. Now, a year later, we're looking back and seeing that some of the students that were below grade level on iReady did not receive the intervention. likely because they didn't rise to the same level on these diagnostics that were provided through the LLI and WonderWorks program. So there were two different metrics that one was being used in September and October last year to identify intervention needs, the diagnostic and LLI and WonderWorks, and now we're comparing them to students based on iReady data. So that we weren't using iReady data in September to identify students needing the support. So
Can I go one layer further than that? And I think it complicates it here, given that, according to the data, more Latinx and African American students are receiving the intervention than our enrollments. So if we have more African American and Latinx students not receiving the intervention, I'm curious about, I don't want to use the word profile anymore. What did we say we were going to use yesterday instead of profile of students?
Portrait.
Portrait of students. So I guess I just want a little bit more information on who those students that did not receive the intervention may be. Given that they are similar in terms of us being able to identify them, iReady or not, as being below grade level.
Right, so what Dr. Brown showed up on that slide up there is that more Hispanic and African American students were in the intervention than are in our schools generally.
Correct.
Right. And so on these screener assessments that our teachers administered in September and October, students across all demographics would have shown where they might need some additional support. And then those students were selected for the intervention.
Okay.
So you're asking what are the demographics of the students not in the intervention?
Yes.
Yeah, and so I think it's probably comparable to the gray bands that you see up there.
Yeah, it would actually be some of the inverses. So we could pull it, but actually you would have relatively proportionally fewer Latinx students and fewer African American students not in the intervention.
That's what I would expect, right?
Then you would have the intervention. Yeah, and part of the comparison group is we have the gift of hindsight, right? Yeah. So we're using different data to analyze growth now than we had, like Mr. Moskowitz was saying, for placing students. So next year when we continue this evaluation, it'll look a little bit different because we'll have to think about our comparison groups a little bit different. But we just definitely don't want to compare them to the general student body, right? We don't want to say, here's how kids in intervention did compared to everybody who wasn't in intervention, because they're have very differing needs.
Yeah, methodologically makes perfect sense, but I just wanted to get clarification then who's not getting the intervention here. Yeah, thank you.
So we'll keep going and we'll hold our questions till the end. I apologize.
That's okay. If it gets technical, we need to clarify it, so that's fine. And as we talk about growth, just a reminder from previous meetings, we're going to be talking about median growth, not mean growth. We definitely have some outliers that have very different scores that would affect mean. So we looked at medians to really tell us where the middle 50% of students are as we look at growth. So when you do a first survey, you see that generally students in the intervention, the median level was 95% of their yearly target for growth. Students not in the intervention, similar students not in the intervention, was 93%, which is not a huge difference. But we would not want to stop right there at the this is all LLI and WonderWorks kids together. This is all grades mushed together. So we'd want to really dig in a little bit deeper and figure out, does that pattern hold true in every grade level and doesn't hold true for LLI and WonderWorks evenly? And the reality is it does not. So when you keep WonderWorks and LLI together, but you break it out by grade, you actually see that there is differential impacts across the grades. So when the two are considered together, kindergartner and first grade students in the intervention actually showed slightly less growth than the students who weren't, but in grades 2 through 5, the impact of being in the intervention was increased student growth compared to the students who weren't in the intervention. So you start to see a pattern that shows that there is some bright spots in some areas where students are making achievement gains by being in these interventions that you wouldn't have seen if you just started at the overall look. And then we can break it down even further and look specifically at LLI and WonderWorks. When you look at all grade levels together for LLI, the median growth was 94% for in intervention and 93% for out of intervention. For WonderWorks, it was 104% of their yearly target in intervention and 97 out of intervention. And please ignore the RR there. We are also beginning to look at reading recovery as an intervention, but we have not finished that analysis yet, so I don't want to talk about that today. But when you break it out by grade levels, you actually see there's differing patterns between the two interventions. You see that generally LLI seem to have much more impact grades 3 through 5, whereas WonderWorks had much more impact grades 1 through 3. So it's an interesting finding, and it's actually really nice that we did a pilot with 2 different programs, because it now starts to show that the programs, because they have different compositions and makeups, actually impact different grade levels slightly differently. And so, again, when you look at the overall, you would say it doesn't seem like a significant impact. But if you are a first grader in WonderWorks, that's a significant impact. If you're a 5th grader in LLI, that's a very significant impact. You're talking about students who are making tremendous growth. And in fact, actually, in the grades where they had the most impact, the distribution showed, we picked meetings right in the middle, right? There are some kids who obviously made less than that, but there's a lot of kids who made 2 years of growth in the grades that were most impacted by their particular intervention. So the distributions were actually very interesting. So for some students, when it worked, it really, really worked well. And this was true across sites. So future research for us is to find out what was going on with those students and what made it so impactful for those particular students. But there's lots of them. So the next question we asked, after we asked about the grades question and separating, is what about for different groups of students? Was it more or less impactful based on your demographic background, or based on how far behind you scored on iReady to start the year, which again was information we didn't have when you were placed in the intervention, right? We have it post. And so you can see that for the demographic groups, there are differential impacts. For example, for LLI, African American students in the intervention did better than African American students out of it, whereas for Asian students that pattern's reversed, right? So we do see some slight shifts, but they're not huge. I would caution you, any of the ones that have really, really big changes, like for example, the LLI Filipino students, the N number is really, really small. You're talking about a handful of students who happen to be in that group. So 1 or 2 students really changes a median when you're only talking about 5 students as opposed to talking about 500 students, right, in some of the other groups. But it does show that there was differential impact, and specifically our Latinx and African American students were supported by the program as compared to their peers who weren't in the program. And then we also see, if we think about goal 1, right, this idea that students who are behind grade level would exhibit more than a year's worth of growth. Both programs actually had greater impact for students the farther behind students were to start the year, which is a good finding, right? Like the more support you need, the more growth you got when you were in the program, the more catching up that you did. So both of these programs actually had that finding across the schools and across grade levels. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Moskowitz to talk about next steps, and then I can answer data questions at the end. But the findings were basically both programs were positively impactful for students. Specific student grade levels were important, as were how far behind a student was when they started. But in both cases, both programs were impactful.
So I'm going to provide you about 2 minutes of professional development that would normally take like a year's worth of learning as a teacher. So I'm just going to give you the snapshot. So what you see up on
Do
the
we get a
screen-
certification at the end?
What's that?
Do we get a certification at the end?
If you'd like, I can make
Okay.
a certificate.
Okay,
Sure.
great.
So this is what is referred to as Scarborough's rope. And so really the primary thing I want you to take away from this is that when students are learning how to read, when people are learning how to read, there are really 2 big buckets that are equally important when we think about reading. One of them is what we call word recognition or foundational skills. That's things like phonics, phonemic awareness. You hear about these things, and that primarily happens in our kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade years. If students can't read, can't decode the word, you can see they're going to struggle in having that automaticity that we need in order to be able to read as fluent readers. The other bucket is what we would broadly call language comprehension. It's things like vocabulary development, conceptual understanding. So you think about you're reading something in a science text. You have to understand the words, the technical words. You have to be able to picture this thing that's happening in the environment, right? So that you have to understand and have this vocabulary and knowledge and be able to apply it to these larger concepts. That's equally important, right? So the two together are what create this skilled reading rope that Scarborough has researched many years ago. So when you go back to, and actually, Dr. Brown, if you go back to the slide that shows the grade level breakdown. Oh, there it is, perfect. You knew where I was going. All right. So the good news, here's the good news, that as our teams, led by Lisa Worsham and her colleagues, as they were implementing these two programs last year, they were realizing and discovering some things along the way, right? So these are talented teachers, talented individuals. They were discovering along the way. So one of the things they discovered was that WonderWorks had a stronger foundational skills program. So when you think about that bottom part of that rope, phonics, phonemic awareness, WonderWorks had a stronger program, and they found it to be more successful with students. So when we're looking at the data and we're seeing that there's really high growth in WonderWorks in students in grades 1 and 2, that actually isn't a surprise to us because we were seeing that in implementation. LLI is a program that's very strong or stronger in the vocabulary and the building conceptual knowledge and understanding. So when you look at the data at LLI schools, where do we see the big growth? 4th and 5th. 3rd, 4th, and 5th. These are students who probably already had the foundational skills, but they just needed some additional support around the language comprehension. And by providing that through LLI, we were able to get some pretty dramatic results. So if we go then to the last slide, really what I want to talk about are some of the adjustments we're already in process of making for this year. So I just referenced a moment ago the one. WonderWorks, we saw, had a slightly stronger phonics program, foundational skills program. So something that Lisa and her team have created, and Liz Gladness is the one who actually created the documents. They've created a foundational skills intervention program that is being implemented. It's being all of our literacy teachers, regardless of program, have been trained, in addition to LLI and WonderWorks, how to implement this foundational skills intervention module that we're going to be able to provide to our kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd grade students at all of our schools. And possibly even, frankly, sometimes you will have 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders who have a gap in their foundational skills. It may be a fluency issue. So we plan to see, we hope to see, based on already what we're implementing, that all of our students in grades K2 will see increased growth regardless of which program, LLI or WonderWorks, that they're implementing. So that's one example. I'm going to jump back to the bottom, and then I'll come back up to the middle. The other thing that our teachers are becoming more adept at is identifying the specific reading needs of a student that is 2 or 3 years below grade level. Not all students who are 2 years below grade level are in the same place. Some have gaps in their foundational skills. Some have gaps in their language comprehension skills. And you can't just automatically, as we know more now, you can't just automatically apply kind of a one-size-fits-all program. So as we're continuing to explore, we're thinking about this year, how do we kind of fill some of those gaps? But more importantly, as we even think about next year, assuming we have another year of kind of similar data, we're thinking about now, what might it look like for a school to have both WonderWorks and LLI at a school? For students who have the needs with the foundational skills, that we might implement WonderWorks as the primary intervention for those students. For students whose gap is really in the language comprehension category, maybe we implement LLI for those students. And it's not about running a program at a school, but actually more specifically meeting the individual needs of students and matching to the program that will best fill those gaps that they may have in their reading. So this work is ongoing now. We'll continue to monitor the data this year. And if we get a second year of confirmation of those outcomes, then that will be what we wanted all along, which was to spend a couple of years of piloting programs, learning from the results, and then making a long-term implementation plan for our literacy interventions. And then the last just bullet point I'll point out there is our schools are already thinking about how do we become more intentional about when students receive the intervention. And then to the point that you brought up a moment ago, Dr. Benitez, we are implementing iReady now. All students will have taken their iReady diagnostic by next Friday. The intervention groups that will be starting, that have already started and will be running into starting in October, will be based on iReady Diagnostic 1. So all of the students in the program should be in that 2 to 3 years below grade level. Obviously, a first grader can't be 2 to 3 years below, so they may just be the one. But we'll be really identifying students below grade level. We'll be identifying the specific needs of what they have, and then hopefully tailoring their supports based on the needs that they're exhibiting at the beginning of the year.
I love that statement. Thank you.
Of course, that will make it impossible to have comparison group next year data-wise, but that's okay. We'll figure out another way to look at the efficacy.
I thought about
of the
that
program.
a moment ago, but I'll leave that up to you and your
that's
team to
okay.
figure out.
We will handle that.
What was that term that she used? I'll have to go back to it. Strategic planning, about it's always changing. Like that. It's a thing that's dynamic, all of the things. So thank you for the presentation. So I'll go to my colleagues first for questions, clarifications, anything you'd like to ask of the team. Dr. Benitez.
One quick question on the last point that you made, Mr. Moskovitz. So, if we do see the biggest impact from WonderWorks on those first couple of grade levels, and the intervention is for those students that were 2 or more grade levels behind, how did we account for which students were participating in first and second grade?
Yeah, so as I said, first graders would never be more than 1 year behind by
Correct.
definition, right? So a first grader we would pull would be those that are 1 year behind. On the diagnostic, they're scoring at the kindergarten level in first grade.
Got it.
So those would be the in
Got it.
second grade, they might be at kinder or first grade potentially.
Yeah, that was a quick, easy one. Okay, so we referenced ELs, right? We have a large number of ELs, particularly at the elementary level. And I'm assuming that many of those ELs are lumped in with the Hispanic subgroup, not all, but many. What have we learned, if anything, when we disaggregate ELs and think through? Do we have a LLI version in Spanish? I know we have maravillas, so just if you can talk through the EL scenario.
I can speak a little bit to that, and then I'll obviously invite my colleagues to jump in as well. One of the programs that we did implement last year, we didn't have enough data to pull it out. There is a program that we're implementing at our dual immersion sites. Pacific Learning, I believe, is the publisher of the program. And because we only have a few dual immersion sites, we weren't as confident in the data, but we're looking at, is this a program that could be used in support of our bilingual students that could support maybe potentially even being implemented with our English learners. The other thing that we're looking at is, you've heard us mention a few times this year, I think, related to Elevation. It's a new platform that we're using, one, to ensure the compliance aspect for our EL students as they progress. But there are also some strategies that we'll be looking at how we use those in conjunction with the programs that we're looking at. And then the last thing I'll say is, remember, these are, what we're talking about here are tier 2 interventions. There is a 6 hours worth of tier 1 quality core instruction that's happening every day. So our literacy teachers coming in is just that additional extra nice to have. But we know that our expectation is that our classroom teachers are providing small group instruction, intervention, if you will, in the classroom based on what they're seeing. And that includes things like ELD, designated integrated ELD on a regular basis. So this is by no means the sole support that students are receiving, but we did know that we wanted to ensure, as we transition from the old way of literacy to new, that we want to make sure that we're using some research-based approaches for students who are exhibiting maybe some significant gaps in their reading ability.
Good segue to that second question, Mr. Moskovitz. So knowing that our students with disabilities always also receive additional accommodations and or supports, how are they accounted for through our interventions?
Yes, I'm not sure if we specifically ran data on these programs with students with disabilities, but they all are also included in interventions provided at a school. Obviously, the program that a student may be in will determine the level of intervention. So if a student was in a moderate to severe class, they likely would not participate in something like WonderWorks or LLI. But our students in our mild to moderate classes, our RSP students, speech and language absolutely would be able to participate, not just in these interventions, but remember we also had after-school tutoring opportunities, including provided by our own teachers and outside agencies. You heard last year, Dr. Simon and her team talked about the LRAP intervention for students in special education. So there's a variety of interventions that we are implementing that do also include students in special education.
Yeah, it'd be great. And again, I'm thinking just in terms of percentage of our data. I mean, what do we have, Dr. Brown? 12 to 15% of our students on IEPs?
Yeah, it's about 12%.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay, I just had one clarifying question on page 7 and 8. So the difference between LLI and WonderWorks, did you see, because obviously you can't disaggregate every data point for us, or we'd have 175 slides up here every night. So in terms of students with different backgrounds, did you see that reflected as you disaggregated the grade level data individually? So in WonderWorks grade 1, so +9 on WonderWorks, did you see that at every grade level, or did our students do better once it was disaggregated? Just a ballpark, if you recall.
Sure. Actually, so the data that's there is for all of it together.
Right.
We did disaggregate, but I don't have that number in front of me, okay. So I can pull it. It is in our syntax for running the data, where we can pull out each group by grade level, but we didn't for sake of this.
And I would imagine that if it was anything vastly different, you probably would have included it as a kind of an outlier or something that surprised you in the work. I think that was it. Oh, Mr. Otto.
So I don't know if this is an answerable question, but so how long does it take when you institute new programs like this to, we obviously know there's some fine tuning that goes on, but is it 2 years, is it 3 years before you have confidence that what it is that you're doing is and will continue to make a difference in how it is that you do these things?
I think that's the great question, which is why we start looking at them year one. I would say that most of the data that I'm going to present to you as this year is really about 1 year of implementation, right, as we've come post-pandemic. And so the lens I would like to always provide is this was first implementation year. I don't know how many years it takes to be really sure, but I know that after year one, we are not really sure because of implementation issues. I generally have said 3 years, not that that has any sort of background other than past experience, but I would definitely would not put huge shifts in earlier than 3 years of seeing trend data. So that's why we'll look at this year. We'll continue to look at it mid-year, next year, and starting the year after that to help then support decision-making by the team.
I think something to just add to that is that while maybe large decisions about whether we keep programs, which program, funding, and those may take time to make decisions about the long-term implementation, I just want to reinforce that our principals, our teachers, and specifically our leaders in this program are constantly looking at data and making those mid-course corrections. So we're looking at data over the last year. A year from now, we'll look at data again, but rest assured that from now until next year, there will continue to be adjustments made to the way we implement the program, to the students involved in the program, to other programs and interventions they may need to be a part of along the way based on that data. So we will be making those mid-course corrections throughout the year, and then over the course of multiple years, we'll make some of the larger decisions as a district about continuity and funding and things like that.
And new things that come online, I suppose, and that look like that they may be promising, or it's an ongoing process of improvement, continuous improvement.
Absolutely.
Great, thanks.
Yes, Dr. Benitez.
I'll be really quick. I just want to say, great presentation today. I mean, kudos to the entire team, and as you mentioned, Mr. Moskowitz, it's everyone, right? But also kudos to our superintendent for getting us to an agenda every meeting where we can talk about student outcomes, all right? And in particular, highlighting interventions as they align with our data, right, and the broader strategy. So just great presentation tonight.
Thank you. So we're going to move into item 16, superintendent items. 16.1, approval of student readmits.
Thank you. I have recommendations for 2 readmits tonight. I'm pleased to recommend that the expulsion of the following students be lifted and that they be assigned to a school or instructional program as recommended. I will take these 2 together. These are the readmissions of student 4805 and 7570.
Do we have a motion?
Move approval.
So move. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes 500. Next item.
Next item, I do have the recommendation for one expulsion, student number 5448. This student would be expelled under Education Codes 48915C5 and would not be eligible to apply for readmission until after June 2023. However, Student Placement Services has made the recommendation that the student be expelled with a consideration for suspended expulsion with an opportunity to attend another school within LBUSD.
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes 5-0-0. So we're moving on to new business, 17.1. And I'm going to ask for clarification from Wayne. Adoption of initial bargaining proposals from the California Schools Employees Association, Chapter 2, Unit A, to Long Beach Unified School District. In the past, when we sunshine things, it's an information item. Do you want us to make a motion to just accept these? Because it does say adoption.
It's the adoption of the initial bargaining proposals, so yeah.
Okay.
It's information? No.
Where does it say that? I'm sorry, where does it
Well,
say
in our new system, it doesn't distinguish between information.
It's not printed out that way.
Not on the printouts, though, so.
And it does read as adoption.
Yeah. And the proposals can be adopted at this point, that's fine.
Yeah, but on our printed copies,
Yeah.
it doesn't list it that way.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the actual agenda item. It does say information, but I know one of the practices that we've tried to get better at is kind of cleaning it up so that from a perspective of if someone asked, when did we see them and when did we sunshine them, we have a record of saying, yes, we saw them, sunshined them, and we acknowledge that we sunshined them by receiving and filing, for lack of a better term. So is that what we're looking at doing? So we want to do them as an action item? Is that possible since the agenda says information?
I'm concerned because the written, printed, it says, I think it says adoption.
It does.
It does. It doesn't say information.
And it doesn't say information.
At least not on my copy.
Yeah, mine either. So, and it's fine either way. I mean, we're going to be okay here. But
Okay.
I think in order to follow the Brown Act correctly, we should adopt, the board should adopt the proposals because that's on the agenda.
What does adopt mean?
Adopting of initial proposals?
Yes.
Meaning that bargaining will happen later and negotiations will
Basically,
happen later.
you're
and at some
acknowledging and
point,
accepting.
we will adopt a final.
Right.
I'd like to raise sort of, I think, a higher up issue, that if on the public copy of the agenda, it says information item, and then we're taking action here based on our.
Thank you.
So can I
Yes,
just share
No, you
that
just-
our past practice has been with the sunshining process that we introduce it as an information item at the first board meeting, and then we bring it back to the second board meeting as an action item, so that we give individuals not only an opportunity to see it, but to fully have an opportunity to respond to it before it's actually adopted.
Understood,
So
Mr. Zane.
I will say that I can only speak to past practice, not necessarily to the Brown Act, but I will say that we have traditionally taken it as an information and tried to make sure that in writing we're acknowledging that it's just an information item for everyone to have an opportunity to see it. And then 2 weeks later, we bring it back again as an action item.
And Mr. Zay, just as a connecting to that, I believe at the next board meeting, there will be a public hearing related to that.
Right.
So then it gives people a chance to speak during that public hearing, and then you would take action after public comment.
And let me also just say regarding the Brown Act, if we put on adoption and we don't take action, that's fine. The problem is if we don't say we're going to adopt or take action and we take action. So we certainly, just because it says adoption, we don't have to take action.
As
right?
long
Okay.
as the public version of the agenda didn't say action, right? That's what I'm trying to verify and clarify. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So all three items, items 17.1, 17.2, and 17.3 are listed on the public agenda as information items. So I'm going to read each one individually, and we will verbally acknowledge that, and I am choosing that we will not take action on those items tonight. So item 17.1, adoption of initial bargaining proposals from the California Schools Employees Association, Chapter 2, Unit A to Long Beach Unified. 17.2, adoption of initial bargaining proposals from the California Schools Employees Association, Chapter 2, Unit B to Long Beach Unified School District. And 17.3, adoption of the initial bargaining proposals from Long Beach Unified School District to the California School Employees Association, Chapter 2, Unit A and B. Those three are listed in their entirety in the agenda for the public to see. Action will be taken further, so we as a board are acknowledging that we see them, they're public, they're available for folks, and they will have an opportunity to make comment on them in upcoming board meetings. Thank you. So we're going to move on to item 17.4, potential student board member policy. So this is listed, I believe, as an action item.
This is information or action.
Or action, okay.
Depending on the board's
We really have to
discussion.
We really have to figure out a
tonight.
way to work on the printed copies, just for future reference. Thank you.
Yeah. So this is actually an item that I did during superintendent's report or superintendent's items in the last board meeting, just to share with you where we're headed in terms of bringing a policy to you for contemplation. So these are the same slides that I used 2 weeks ago, and just to review what this policy means to us and what the potential is for your discussion. If you don't have any changes that you want to see in the policy, then it's there for you potentially to take action tonight. So this is a policy building on a tradition that we experienced tonight, where a single board member comes on a rotating schedule to represent their associated student body at each of the board meetings. And then, as has been a more recent tradition, they give their reports and then they head out. This is a different version of having a student board member. And so this version is bringing a student board member to the governance team, where they would actually sit with you at the dais for the entire board meeting. And it's really an opportunity to take our concept of student voice and think about how we build student voice literally into the governance team. Tonight would have been a great example when we're talking about student outcomes, to have a student sitting with us to say, what do you wonder from a student perspective? Obviously, some of that might be more interesting to them if it's high school data and we want to get a student perspective, but it's an opportunity to think of them as a member of the governance team. And so, as I did the last meeting, I talked a little bit about the formal election of students, and then what a student board member, what their roles and responsibilities are, and then what kind of training exists for students. And so just some highlights. You have the entire proposed policy in front of you that Mr. Strumpfer drew up for us based on best practice and other research. But here are some highlights. So the election of the student board member is done, or the selection is done in consultation with the board president and myself, or superintendent. They're selected as a candidate from a leadership pool that means that they have been elected to a position already by their peers. So we're not just putting out an application saying, who wants to do this? They will need to be a student that has been selected to a leadership position by their peers. The policy is written so that there's some flexibility. They can be appointed for a monthly, semester, or on an annual basis. And I'll talk specifically about my recommendation for this year, especially as we explore this new policy. And then lastly, we can determine whether there's one or more students in this policy. And so a few highlights around students' roles and responsibilities. And if you have specific questions, again, there's more detail in the actual policy that's before you. But that student board members, they attend all board meetings, so they would sit for the entirety of the board meeting. They get all open session materials. And then they're here to also participate in question and answer, to provide their perspective. They can cast a preferential vote on open session items. It's a formal expression of opinion, however, it does not count towards the board's vote. So a really nice opportunity for students to express themselves and be able to say why they're voting in a certain way. They're invited beyond the board room. They have opportunities to attend functions alongside you all, alongside senior staff, to attend on behalf of the board school events and community events. And then just a point of clarification, they're not part of the Brown Act and they're not counted in determining a quorum. So you cannot ask a student board member for you if we are in need of a quorum. Something exciting when I think about a student who might be interested in this, this is not just sitting at the dais, it's really an opportunity for training. So we're fortunate that at a state level, there are trainings held for student board members. In fact, I recently had correspondence with a student board member who's sitting on the state board. She reached out to see what's going on with student voice in our district, and also to connect if we have a student board member. So there are workshops and there are ways that students can get involved beyond our district. And then internally, we anticipate both the vice president of the board taking a leadership role in helping a student to onboard into the student board member, and then also senior staff and those who interact with you most regularly in the board office. So not just to sit, but think about, and Mr. Otto and Mr. Miller, you had an experience of onboarding as our most recently elected board members, where you learn about the functions of different departments in the district, you learn about governance. At the student level, it wouldn't likely be less intense than that, but it would give a student who's interested the opportunity to learn as well. And so just to the point of our time frame for this year, so in this policy, I'm imagining that for this year that we will go through, as you can see in the slide, the fall, a selection process, meaning putting out holding an information session for students, probably on Zoom, where we describe what this position is. This is a big commitment, so this is something that we want students to really be interested in before they make a decision. If we have multiple students who submit their names, we would need to go through a short selection process. Again, it's a selection by board president and superintendent from a student who was already elected by their peers to a leadership position, and then we would provide onboarding for them. I'm imagining that the student would start with us in January of this year, so they would have a second semester experience and help us to learn into this process as well, but not waiting until next year when it might seem like a natural opportunity to bring in a student. That student could help us to know what we need to know differently, or what we need to do differently based on their experience. And then we would use the high school processes as they elect associated student body members for the following year, and students are elected into other positions. We would use the spring then to select for a July 1st, 2023 student board member to come on board with you, likely for the entire school year. Yeah, so these are the highlights. Let's talk.
Mr. Otto.
Yeah, I'll apologize for this before I actually say it, but so in your draft policy under student training, you say senior team and/or staff may provide a training module, but then you talk about onboarding, which isn't mentioned at all, and I think it's important. I would suggest that it reads something like senior team and/or staff not may but will provide, because I think it's critically important and not much of a stretch to do that. Will provide a training and/or onboarding module at or near the beginning of the student's term, just so that they understand and we understand that these are expectations that will go.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you.
Dr. Benitez.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Baker. I really like the idea in principle. I think it would be great to have student or students have those opportunities, and for us to lift up the student voice. We always talk about our priority to do that. I think my questions are more around maximizing if it's going to be a one-year commitment. I know the draft policy says it could be month to month or semester. And here's the scenario. When we hear from our wonderful current student school board members, most of them, I think, have been in their senior year, and so they've already sort of either thought about or made decisions about where they're going to apply for college, sort of the culminating experiences at the end of the year. So in terms of selection of students, I'm wondering, just thinking out loud, because it's draft, it's information, how do we maximize potentially on a 10th grader or 11th grader that has, a year or more ahead of them, that while we're lifting up student voice, they can actually maybe go back to their schools, bring stuff back, and so like in the spring, they could actually return if they haven't graduated yet and sort of see where that work is either going or helping to inform or leading. So I'd like for us to think about if you could provide us some more information on sort of who that may be that we can consider. If it's and again, I'm basing it on the premise that if it's just going to be one, if it's going to be more than one, or there may be, either a month or a semester, and we have two. Just thinking out loud. So how do we maximize potentially not just, and I'm not trying to minimize or trivialize this, having that culminating sort of reflective experience.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So two things I hear. One seems like more of perhaps our implementation of the policy and thinking about how do we recruit, how do we really maximize, like not just a senior who's outgoing, but this might be a very formative high school experience for. That seems like the policy itself kind of constructs a way for us to do that, but that's in the implementation. And then also just want to make a note that this will not take the place of a visiting student board member. So we still want to ensure that you all get to hear from a senior from every school on a rotating basis. However, I'm imagining that they might come to the podium and do their ASB-oriented presentation and update you on each school separately. Yeah. So it doesn't take the place of it. So I'm glad that you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So then that leads me to sort of my second, and it's inquiry, right, at this point?
Yeah.
And this is more, I guess, with the implementation, right? Again, I'm for it in principle. I think it would be really important for us to be intentional that usually our elected students are the most engaged, the highest achieving, the most plugged in. How we would consider, especially if we're going to look at an 11th or a 10th grader that may not be elected yet or may not be in a previous position of leadership, but has that promise, right? So if they're, just kind of considering, we have our seniors who are applying or have applied to university and college. What about those students that just came out of that 9th grade, Jay, Dr. Camarino, that were at promise and in the 10th grade can talk about some of those interventions and strategies and actually, again, bring that to the board?
Well, we definitely can go back and look at that. There are some ed code requirements around this position in terms of student elected by peers, but we'll look at the flexibility of it. I don't know, Mr. Strumper, if you want to add anything to that.
That was it for me.
No, that's right. In the ed code, in this section, the requirement is that a student board member is in some fashion elected by their peers. So the idea behind selecting either a class president or a student body president, but we can look at, class treasurer, class vice president. I mean, there's a raft of folks you could look at. So we certainly can consider that option when we look at students.
And I was actually going to ask Dr. Camarino a question. So then it was exactly that. I usually don't jump the line, but I'm going to, since it's in that same vein. What are the elected? So we know there's, obviously class president, class officers. I know student school site council could be an option as well, which isn't grade dependent. So can you talk about at the high school level what opportunities there are for students to be elected by their peers that we might not know about?
Yeah. There's also club presidents that they're part of clubs. They get initiated or they get nominated for president or different positions in their clubs, but as well as ASB, and all that is run through our ASB directors. So students should stay tuned to all the feeds that come in through the ASB office. They have all the information from the ASB directors of all of our schools for all positions that are voted upon.
So we could have potentially a student from a club that's a special interest club that isn't necessarily ASB who has been elected that would fit the criteria according to ed code. So that sounds like it would open
definitely
up the
look
pool
at that
significantly.
Our pathway ambassadors, is there an elected position in the pathway ambassador work?
There are positions for pathway ambassadors within the pathway nominations, but within that pathway classroom, the students vote for their leader in that small group.
So it sounds like there's a wider pool than just what we think of as a traditional ASB in terms of club officers, pathway ambassadors, broader school representation than just ASB. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Mr. Otto.
Yeah, I think the draft policy is wide open as to that. It says that the Board of Education, in consultation with the superintendent, may appoint a student board member, and we can do it then however it is that we want to do it. As I was listening to all these presentations today, I thought maybe we could get their iReady scores and use that as a basis.
I think we were just trying to be compliant with Ed Code. I was getting eyeballed from Mr. Strumpfer over there.
Yeah, but I don't want to be too formal about this. I mean, I think we need the discretion to do this. This is a great add-on, an opportunity for somebody that we want to pick who could be a 10th grader or an 11th grader, whatever it is that we want. Special, but we can make those kinds of decisions. But if we make it too specific, it undermines what it is that we're trying to do here, which is to get somebody, give them an experience, give us an experience, and go forward. It seems that the language is good.
Well, may I ask Dr. Camarino also, for ASB elections, is there a first semester, second semester election? So Dr. Benitez, when you were talking about the 1 year, the annual, I started to count up in my head, how many meetings would that be per semester? And think that's a lot. So perhaps we follow kind of a same sequence, a first semester, second semester.
Especially if we start in July. Okay, Mr. Miller, did you have any clarifications, questions?
I guess I do, but I'm still kind of thinking on it. I guess the piece that I'm looking at in regard to the opportunity here is that, and Dr. Benitez already hit it on the nose, where most of the time our students in ASB, who I obviously really enjoy when they come and participate at the school board meetings, they're often our students who are already academically performing to the best of my knowledge. I wonder if there's a way now, and this is me brainstorming, and I hate talking off the cuff when I'm up here, but is there like elections with our kids that are like in a GOC, right? Like, what about those kids? Like these kids that feel undervalued or have made some mistakes. And all, I don't want to say that we'd be rewarding poor behavior or a mistake, but in the same token, give them an opportunity to be in a position of value and make them feel valued. I think there's power there. I just don't know how we do it.
Yeah.
And so
I hear a lot of really good sentiment about being thoughtful about who we select. So that's a huge takeaway. It's what we would want. Also, we also want to find a student who will, with the kinds of supports that exist on this position, that can also feel successful, because it's a one position. There are, as you've heard us say, there are hundreds of leadership positions that happen at schools. So we'll definitely take into consideration what you're talking about.
So once again, I have no idea how to pull that off, but just something that I'd like to throw out there.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Ms. Craighead, anything before we?
Well, I don't know if this is the right time to talk about the number of students. I mean, we're talking about a year-long commitment or a semester commitment, but are we also talking about choosing one individual student or maybe one representative and an alternate? I know there was some explanation about going to an alternate if the first person couldn't serve, but if we chose them both at the same time, then we wouldn't have to wait and we wouldn't lose any time. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how we have to, do we invite them both to attend every meeting or in addition to our, individual school reps, but how do we feel about that?
I think we start with one, and we learn our way into this. And like if we didn't have a student board member tonight, the meeting, just like if one of you were absent, we would carry on with the meeting as long as we had a quorum. And so I think we start with one, ask the student about their experience and really listen to what they need from us, kind of test it out, and then determine next year if we're going to have an alternate or a second student, and keeping the rotation so that you do hear, in addition to the selected student, you continue to hear from every high school.
I was thinking more in terms of if they weren't able to fulfill the commitment, not just an absence, but if we choose a student for a semester and then a month from now they decide they can't fulfill that commitment, then we would already have somebody to come in and
Sure.
and
Okay.
take
Good
over.
idea. Ideally, we would have a handful of student applicants that we could draw from to have an alternate.
Okay. So Dr. Baker, it sounds like, I think we're all genuinely on board with the idea. There's some details that we're all interested in seeing fleshed out. If we were to make a motion to approve this tonight, would you be able to bring back potentially at the next meeting what that process would look like, how we would be communicating it to each school site to ensure that we're casting as wide a net as possible? Because I would like for us to approve this tonight, or to make a motion to approve and take a vote, because as you said, I think this is one of those things we need to jump and get students involved, because we'll learn a lot in the process, and then we can make amendments to the policy. Y'all can make amendments to the policy in the spring as you start to look at what would be done in the next year, even in conversation with that student board member. But I think it's important, if we pass it, to get the process going so that a student could sit at this dais, in January with y'all.
So there were two things that I think fell into policy recommendations that Mr. Otto raised in the category of student board member training. And I think it's simple word change and a word addition. So the superintendent or designee, I think the suggestion was will instead of may. And then at district expense, provide, and I think there's an insert, onboarding, comma, and then as the rest of it is written, training opportunities to the student board member through trainings. Let's see, provide learning opportunities to student board members through onboarding, and then trainings, workshops, and conferences. The other ways that the other things that you spoke about seem like implementation, as you're requesting, Ms. Kerr. So with those two changes, it is to the board to decide whether you want to approve the policy.
Okay. And I'll also say that California School Board Association, as you said, have a student board member. They have meetings of student board members. There is December 1st, their annual conference, which is happening in San Diego, which has a full slate of workshops for student board members. So again, I think the sooner we can bring someone on, that's an opportunity for onboarding in addition to the staff, but there's also that piece that happens, but that's the first weekend in December. So I just wanted to call that out for my colleagues to consider.
So, Mr. Strumpfer, do you want to make a recommendation about how to handle the changes in language to the policy?
I have one more question about
Okay.
one more aspect of the
Okay.
language, and maybe you can take them all. So there is a section on page, they're not numbered, sorry.
It's okay.
Let me just figure out what page this is. Page 2, very bottom, a student board member may make a motion that may be acted upon. Do we need to address that now, or that would be on a case-by-case, meeting-by-meeting basis based on what our agendas are? Because I think I think we should figure that one out.
Yeah, the law allows you to make that decision as to whether you allow the board member to make motions or not, the student board member to make motions or not. So the reason I put may in that policy is to give you that flexibility.
So the wording takes care of it then, Wayne?
Yeah, the wording allows you the flexibility to do what you want to do.
Okay.
And for making a motion, that would be on an item on the agenda, so they would be able to move approval of an item. Is that for
Correct.
clarification?
But can't vote on it.
symbolic.
They get to do this, yeah.
Their
symbolic
vote isn't counted as for public record.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you allow them to, if you want them to, they can make a motion.
Just wanted to clarify whether we needed to include that now. So, yeah, sorry, Wayne, you were going to address the two.
Sorry, what was it?
The two words, so changing under student board member training, changing the word may to will, and then adding onboarding to such as those offered or workshops and conferences through onboarding, training, workshops, and conferences.
Yeah. So the motion would just be as amended. You can make a motion to approve the policy as amended by Dr. Baker.
I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Okay. I was gonna add as amended by Dr. Baker, but go ahead.
I'll withdraw mine.
No, I'll second your motion.
Moved and seconded on this side. You can decide how you want to write that down, Letitia. To approve the policy as amended, and Dr. Baker will bring back some of the implementation practices around recruitment and communication of recruitment to us at the next board meeting. Any further discussion?
I think if we widen the pool and based on the conversation that we had here today, we're going to get a lot, I'm just saying, of interest in this. So I'm thinking of our ELT, Dr. Brown, and then we had to sort of figure out like how do we not maximize on the opportunity that a lot of students want to engage. So just putting that out there for my colleagues to think through. Okay, if we get a lot of interest in there, we may have to rethink our thinking. But that's a great good trouble. Yeah.
And you could consider bringing some of the folks from the districts you represent into some kind of consultation or student advisory council of your own to engage those folks who.
Yes, and yes, President
Right?
Kerr. Yes.
Absolutely. It's a both and.
Yes.
It's all the things. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion before we vote?
I just really quickly, I think you already clarified one of my concerns, and so to confirm, there is the capability of amendments in regards to communication of this policy along with the recruitment and all of that, but we can still approve this policy as written.
We were separating what needs to be in the policy in contrast to what is implementation of the policy.
Right.
And so the motion that's on the table is to change some wording related to training to not from may to will and adding onboarding. The rest of the policy stands, and then I'll bring back implementation guidelines or guidance as to how we'll implement the policy.
Got it. Thank you.
One more time. Any further discussion? Y'all have your little lights on. That's why I was just checking. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes 5-0-0. That feels like a big thing. So that's exciting. All right. 18, report of board members. Mr. Miller, you want to start us off tonight?
Yes, and I really don't have much. I just wanted to say a big thank you for everybody putting the last 2 days together. I gave a big round of thank yous yesterday, and I know that back-to-back days dealing with us 5 folks with 5 different personalities, 5 different needs, 5 different communication styles, and 5 different senses of humor. You guys have a lot of work. So anyway, I just wanted to send you all a big thank you. Oh, well, I'll save that for you. You can bring it up in your report. That's all.
All right, Dr. Benitez.
I'll be very short as well. It's been a great 2 days now. So echo Board Member Miller's sentiments about thanking everyone that made the last 2 days possible. I do want to highlight I had an opportunity to be at Whittier Elementary School's family picnic last week. Had a wonderful turnout, even though it was hot. But parents, guardians, caregivers, families came out, brought their chairs. So just big shout out to Mr. Jesperson and the whole Whittier team for engaging our communities authentically. No agenda, no ask of parents, just some food, some resources, games, community partners were there, just building community. So that's exactly what we talk about, right, Mr. Grayson? Community engagement without an expectation, right, other than come out and join us, hang out, and have fun. So great model. But I'm going to pressure here because, of course, I'm not going to highlight something without. I'd love to see that every month, Mr. Jesperson. If you're listening and watching and your crew, that would be awesome. Yeah.
Did you see the look on all the former principals' faces when you said that?
I mean, we had hundreds of people out there at 4:30 in the afternoon on like a Thursday or Friday, just hanging out.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez. Ms. Craighead.
Thank you. Did they feed you?
They didn't feed me. They fed everyone else. The pizza was super popular
okay.
that day.
Because it sounded like you were fed, in which case I'm going to go to Whittier too. Congratulations to Newcomb Academy. They were named a National Blue Ribbon School. One of 297 schools recognized across the country, so congratulations to Newcomb. Also, I'd like to mention the CAC. We have an organization within our district, and it's a support group for families with kids with IEPs, special ed, that kind of thing. This group meets on a monthly basis, and they have things like guest speakers. At this last meeting, there was a woman who started a nonprofit organization called Sandy Feet, and it serves the siblings of kids with special needs, which I think is so cool because a lot of times we focus so much of our attention on our kids with special needs, and it's their siblings that feel left out sometimes. So that was wonderful. But I just wanted to highlight that so that people know and are aware that there are these organizations, and it's basically parents supporting parents, and then we have staff. Actually, we have a huge staff that attends these meetings, and it's just wonderful. So there's information online. The organization is CAC, in case anybody's interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Craighead. Mr. Otto.
Yeah, I too will be brief. I want to thank everybody for the workshop yesterday, which I thought was extraordinary. And there was a lot that was talked about. There was a lot of information that was presented, and I'm looking forward to this strategic planning process, which is completely different than strategic planning as I've known it in the past, and I think that it will provide opportunities for community engagement that we've been looking for. And it's tricky because we're going to do a whole bunch of different exercises that will be terrific. And so thank everybody for what they did to put all of that together. It has been 2 full days. My wife, I think, said today when she called, "You're communicating with me entirely by rumor. Where are you?" And I said, "I'm at the school board." Yeah, but there's been a lot of good stuff that's gone on. I particularly want to acknowledge, as has already been acknowledged, the format of our meeting, that we're moving in the direction of student outcome oriented meetings. I take specific and special notice of the fact that there were no resolutions, that we oftentimes were putting into what it is that we did. We've had very good discussions, I think, about what it is that we're supposed to be doing, which is getting our students educated. And so I especially appreciate that. I think that this idea of involving one or more students, I think we had to limit it to less than 100 members of our board, is a great idea, and we're moving forward on that. So the only other thing I would say is I went to the Wilson PTA meeting last week, excellently run by Kim Erkman. Lots of information. They do something called, I think at their first meeting, of the year called PTA 101, where they brought all the senior staff at Wilson High School out and introduced them so that people could see who they were, and then there was an opportunity afterwards to talk to them and just get to know them a little bit. And I think I've shared with everybody on the board, come to the conclusion that this is all about relationships, and you just need those opportunities to do that. So I'm looking forward to exercising that opportunity at other schools within my district. So that's it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Otto. Thanks to staff and to all of the members of community who were present the last 2 days to have good conversations in ways that we're continuing to plan forward to focus on student outcomes. I'm grateful for all of that. And you know what? I'm going to leave it there. I'll toss it to Dr. Baker.
Thank you. So I have several things, but I will try to be quick. The Assistance League, I want to just do a shout out and thank the Assistance League. I want to call it Make a Difference Day. I don't think they call it Make a Difference Day anymore, but it is a beautiful event of providing, first of all, just a wonderful playground event with music and community, but also providing uniforms for every student in the school in a wonderful way, where a family gets to select their uniforms and their clothes and a backpack and books and things. So Willard Elementary School was the site of that on Saturday. So the Assistance League clothes more than 10,000 of our students every year, and I think last year they were closer to 15,000, and they just continue to aim really high on behalf of our students. So it was a great day. Mr. Moskowitz and I got to be there, and Mrs. Craighead was there, right? Okay, not this week. Okay, all right. And then on Saturday also afternoon, I joined Mr. Miller for Operation Jumpstart's college fair on the campus at Cal State Long Beach. About 100 of our Long Beach Unified students participated. Many of them were connected to mentors, others were not. They heard the news through Peach Jar and through the communications office. And so really got to encourage students that were there. There were workshop sessions on getting, accessing the College Promise, on using FAFSA, on traveling abroad. And at the conclusion, we got to hear from a group of students who, each who stood up in the room of about 100, along with their parents, had something really wise that they had learned in planning for their future. So it was a very inspirational day. Let's see, back to school night, elementary and K-8 back to school nights are tomorrow night. So just want to remind the public to get out and support schools to see what your students are up to. And then also in the spirit of talking about strategic planning, our student summit occurs next week. And that means students from every middle and high school and K-8 middle school students will be at Long Beach City College, engaging in helping us to think about the student portrait and what students need from us to advance to 2035 and think about our students. And the team will be going out to Avalon on Thursday to engage with our Avalon students. So entire community. Want to also just wish our community a happy Hispanic Heritage Month. There are lots of activities going on in the city, as well as schools and celebrations of culture in our community. And then lastly, just a quick update on our enrollment. I know that the public often has curiosity about that. And so we are at a decline of 2.7% of our enrollment, which equates to about 1,800 students. And I'll just name it quickly at the different levels so you all can hear it and so our community can hear it. We did have about 100 more TK and kindergarten students, which that is great, but at the elementary level, we are still down from last year to this year. We call it the seabeds comparison, about 421 students in K through 5. In 6 through 8, we are down about 529 students, and in 9 through 12, about 950 students, to a total of close to 1,900 students. The good news is that we have a fabulous planning team, and the projections, so where we staffed and thought about how we were going to start the year, were spot on. And so that 2.7% was planned for. But it's still something really important that we're watching, because as our district declines to 65,616 students, and we continue to see that decline, that takes a lot of planning and a lot of discretion about what we're up to in terms of our budget and our programming. So just wanted to give that little update as a kind of a back to school information that I wanted you all to be aware of. And that's my report for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any announcements, colleagues? Ms. Craighead.
Yes. Mr. Otto, you reminded me about PTA when you mentioned you went to a meeting. And new school year means membership dues. So if somebody approaches you and asks you to become a member of their PTA, please say yes. Thanks.
And you can do that online now. I think Totem is the website. Yes. And it has this nifty little switch that says renew annually automatically. So you can keep being a member in perpetuity or until your credit card expires. So I just have two quick announcements. Tomorrow is Long Beach Gives, which was started a couple of years ago, which gives the opportunity for some smaller nonprofits and programs across the city to have one website and one big exciting day where folks in the community can donate. So I encourage you to go to Long Beach Gives. I think there's over 200 organizations. I always have my favorite 5 that I love, and then I end up finding 10 more somehow, because friends will send you links of something that they're involved with. So it's a great opportunity to even pitch in just a couple of bucks if you have it to different programs, and all of that adds up. So I would encourage you to take a look if you can and donate. Two things I just wanted to reiterate around, we talked about the strategic plan. So there is a strategic plan website, Dr. Baker, I believe, that has information, or Mr. Grayson, I'll refer to you. So if someone heard Student Summit and said, what is that?
The website is under construction,
Okay.
As we're kind of early in the process, but we will have all of the dates of upcoming events, especially the community-driven strategic planning sessions.
Okay, and I know most of those are happening in the later part of October, but you'll keep hearing about it. It's something that will be a recurring theme at each of our meetings, and there will be multiple opportunities for engagement. And also, Dr. Baker, again, the superintendent's goals page is where people would find the data that we talk about, that data monitoring calendar, what's coming up, what we've already covered, as well as the presentations that were on the slides, so folks can look for that information. So under superintendent's goals is where you will find that information and what's to come up at the next meeting. So just places for people to grab information. So if we have nothing else, we will adjourn until Monday, October 3rd, 2022. Have a good one, everybody.